Welcome to the podcast. Before we begin, there is a disclaimer we have to make. Let's Talk Wellness Now brings expert insights directly to you. Please note that the views and information shared by our guests are their own and do not necessarily reflect those of Let's Talk Wellness Now, its management, or our partners. Each affiliate, sponsor, and partner is an independent entity with its own perspectives. Today's content is provided for informational and educational purposes only and should not be considered specific advice, whether financial, medical, or legal. While we strive to present accurate and useful information, we cannot guarantee its completeness or relevance to your unique circumstances. We encourage you to consult with a qualified professional to address your individual needs. Your use of information from this broadcast is entirely at your own risk. By continuing to listen, you agree to indemnify and hold Let's Talk Wellness Now and its associates harmless from any claims or damages arising from the use of this content. We may update this disclaimer at any time, and changes will take effect immediately upon posting or broadcasts. Thank you for tuning in. We hope you find this episode both insightful and thought-provoking. Listener discretion is advised. Now for the show.
Hello, welcome back to Let's Talk Wellness Now. I'm your host, Dr. Deb. And today I want to share with you something deeply personal. It's a chapter of my life that changed everything for me. How I went from diagnosis to healing, from fear to strength. This is a journey of navigating the unknown, facing the unsettling reality of chronic illness, and ultimately choosing a path that aligned with my beliefs and my values. My story is about facing the diagnosis of MS, multiple sclerosis, and going against the grain by choosing a different path. For anyone out there feeling lost, isolated, or misunderstood in their healing journey, this episode is for you. I hope that by sharing my experience, I can inspire others to take control of their health and find their own paths to healing. So let me take you back to the beginning. Life was really busy, and I was doing all the things I loved. I was running a busy medical practice. I have 6 businesses. My career in healthcare was flourishing. I was educating practitioners and training them in functional medicine. My children were grown, but I was loving every minute that I could with my grandchildren. And I was doing a ton of traveling and just really living my life to the fullest. But something wasn't quite right. I started experiencing these strange symptoms that came out of nowhere, or so it seemed. It all began with this deep, relentless fatigue that no amount of rest could fix. Now, it was easy to blow off the fatigue because it was COVID, and I had been sick with COVID twice. I knew that post-COVID fatigue was a real thing. We were just learning about long-haul COVID, and I was busy. I wasn't sleeping much because I was busy and I was stressed and I had lots to do. But I'd sleep and I'd feel like I never even closed my eyes. There was this constant brain fog. This kind of mental exhaustion where even the simplest tasks felt overwhelming. It took me much longer to accomplish things that it had in the past taken me half the amount of time. And then the tingling started. It began with my toes. I love to walk. So I would be walking and all of a sudden realize that I couldn't feel one toe, then another toe. And as we all do, we can make excuses for it. I simply thought that my socks weren't right and my shoes, so I'd stop and I'd change them. And then it must have been my shoes. Maybe those were bad and I needed new ones, or the ones I always walked with suddenly weren't good anymore. Or maybe it was the road and I wasn't used to it because I wasn't walking on the road as much. I was walking in the woods more. And then that sensation started to spread. All of a sudden, it would be a brushing across my leg. And then the brush across the face that felt like a feather. My muscles began to feel really weak. And I felt like they could betray me at any moment. I kept pushing it aside, telling myself I was just overworked or maybe a little too stressed. But deep down, I knew that there was something else going on. It was like my body was trying to send me a message, one that I wasn't quite ready to understand. As I tell all of my clients, if you don't listen to your body will begin to speak louder and louder to you. And eventually, it'll be screaming at you. And I knew that, so I didn't put it off too long, but probably a little longer than I should have. I finally decided to see the doctor, and I went to see my orthopedic specialist, who I trust, thinking, this is just a bad neck issue. I've damaged my neck before. I've had multiple car accidents, multiple whiplashes, and I have a lot of degeneration. It must just be a bad neck. When I sat down to tell him my symptoms, he looked at me and said, Deb, you're a very smart woman. You know what's going on. My neck is bad, and I just need a little cortisone. I'll be fine. When he sat down and pulled up next to me and closely got into my face and said, Deb, I think you have MS. And I remember looking at him very perplexed because that was not on my radar anywhere. I remember feeling a little numb as the words sank in. And it was as if the air had been sucked out of the room at that moment. My husband looked at me, I looked at him, and I was filled with fear and dread. But I had to be strong for my husband. I didn't want him to know how afraid I was. But I couldn't help but think about what this would mean for my future, for my family, for my career. Would I lose my independence? Would I become a burden to those that I loved? It was a devastating moment, one that I've had to share with clients numerous times. But it is very different sitting on the other side of the desk, hearing those words. My doctor's solution was very straightforward. Let's go get a brain MRI. Let's see if what I suspect is correct. And we laughed and joked about how he just wanted to see if I actually had a brain or not. I agreed. And I got in the car that night with my husband, not knowing what to say, not knowing how much to share. My husband doesn't work in the medical field. He doesn't know what's coming if this is truly MS, but I do. We drove quietly for about 20 minutes when he finally looked at me and said, "What does this mean for you? What's going to happen?" And I sat back and I shared with him what could potentially happen with MS. I could lose function in my limbs. I could lose function of my brain. I could end up in a nursing home because no one would be able to take care of me. And that's what we could be looking at right now. And we drove quietly for another 15 or 20 minutes as we went back to my office. And as I always do, I put on a smiling face and I went back to seeing my clients, pretending like none of this happened. All the while, in the back of my head, truly being worried about what I had just learned. So I did the brain MRI, and December 23rd, 2022, I got the call from my orthopedic doctor who said, "Deb, you have white matter brain disease. It's in the prefrontal lobe, and this confirms MS. I want you to go see the neurologist." And the good news is this is early stage. You're young, you're healthy, and this can be treated with immunosuppressing drugs. and we can manage your symptoms. And I sat back and laughed and said, thank you, but that's not the route that I'm interested in taking. In my world, MS is a few other things until proven otherwise. They're toxins, they're infections, and they're nutrient deficiencies, mitochondrial deficiencies, and viruses. So I'm going to go this route, and I'm going to find out what's actually causing my white matter brain disease before I take on an immunosuppressive therapy. He encouraged me to not wait to get treatment, but he understood. And as wonderful as he is, he shared with me his last bit of encouragement and said, I'm here if you need anything. If it doesn't end up being MS, let me know, and we'll take a closer look at what's going on physically for you. And at that moment, I had to call my husband and let him know that the diagnosis looked like it could be MS. And he immediately said to me, Deb, you know the most brilliant people in the world in this field. You know how to heal yourself. You've healed others. We've got this. And then he proceeded to tell everyone in my family and my friends that I had been diagnosed with MS, which I wasn't quite ready to admit to people. But I also understood in that moment that he needed to share, and he needed to have support, and he needed to know that things were going to be okay. So I did what I do best, and I began to do the research and look at all of the things that could potentially trigger MS and take them one by one to identify what is the culprit. And what I realized after all these years of practicing, when we've been taught MS is tick-borne disease until otherwise proven, that MS is so much more than that. It is infection, it is toxins, but it's also traumatic brain injury and non-traumatic brain injury. And it's also a mitochondrial dysfunction. And all of these things put together put us at risk for neurological conditions like MS and Parkinson's and Alzheimer's disease and ALS. And we don't aggressively address these soon enough, in my opinion. We treat what we can treat, and then we just kind of put that to the side and wait until symptoms come, instead of being proactive and looking at the brain every year and seeing what's going on with it and what changes are happening with it, so we can catch these things sooner than later. A $300 MRI would have changed that day for me sooner than later. So here's what I chose to do. I chose to step away from the conventional approach, and that was not an easy decision. It came with risks and doubts and the weight of going against the standard medical advice. The weight of my family saying, are you sure you want to do this? There are so many people that get better with MS. They all knew someone, the lady down the road that had MS, that was debilitating until she took the drugs. And they all looked at me and said, this is your health journey. You get to do this however you want. But I couldn't ignore the nagging feeling that there was another way to do this. I knew I needed to understand that root cause of my symptoms and not just mask them with immunosuppressing drugs. So instead of accepting the regime of these immunosuppressive drugs, I chose to do that research into alternative therapies and explore more natural, holistic approaches. I spent countless hours studying, consulting with friends and colleagues, and putting together the treatment plan that would address the inflammation, the immune system, and the issues that were driving my symptoms. This wasn't a quick fix by any means. I became the guinea pig. But it was about giving my body a chance to heal. I focused on detoxification of the body, reducing inflammation, and rebuilding my immune strength. The journey wasn't just about healing from MS, but it was about healing my entire self. One of the things that I did was radically change my diet. I committed to a strict anti-inflammatory, nutrient-dense diet that was free of processed foods, sugar, and dairy. I focused on eating whole foods, fruits, vegetables, lean proteins, and highly induced fats, good, healthy fats. I also learned about the importance of supplements like omega-3s, magnesium, vitamin D, all which support my nervous system and reduce inflammation. Now, I have been doing this for 25 years with my clients, but this was a different level. We all know about supplementing with these things, but finding the exact right source, finding the exact right dose for each individual person, that is where individualized medicine shines. Next, I turned to detoxification. I realized that years of environmental toxins have built up in my system, possibly contributing to my symptoms. I had bad detox genes. I had worked in moldy buildings. I had remodeled a cottage that had black mold, and I didn't use all of the proper equipment to remediate that process and that property. I started using binders to help remove the heavy metals and toxins from my body, and I incorporated practices like infrared sauna therapy to help me sweat it out. I also did IV chelation. I did nutrient IVs to help remove the toxins and rebuild the myelin in my brain. Another significant part of my healing journey was discovering the advanced power of herbs and some of these natural supplements that I have used forever. I love adaptogens like ashwagandha, but I wasn't using them to help manage my stress and my cortisol levels. I used things like turmeric and ginger. They became staples as part of my anti-inflammatory properties that I used. And as I worked to create this treatment protocol, I tailored it to my needs on a regular basis. And then there was, of course, the emotional and spiritual aspects of healing, which was just as important as the physical. I began practicing mindfulness and meditation to help me manage stress and reconnect with my inner self. This was transformative for me. It allowed me to tune into my body and listen to what I needed and foster that sense of peace and resilience that I hadn't felt in years. I am a trained shaman. I know how to do these things, but I wasn't doing them on a regular basis for myself. I dove deep into the world of spirituality, deeper than I had ever done before. I knew there was a part of me that felt like this came from a previous life, like it was a contract I had, but hadn't fulfilled before, and I needed to fulfill it today. So as I worked along the physical, I also worked along the spiritual side, looking at my guides, my angels, and the people who could tell me what was actually going on, what belonged to me, what belonged to my previous self, and what belonged to others in this world that I had been carrying with me. Some people call this being an empath. This wasn't quite like that. It was very different. I felt in my soul that this was a connection from someplace else. And I learned that it was. Staying the course, I wanted to be honest that this wasn't a smooth journey. There were times when I questioned everything, when I wondered if I was making a mistake by not following the conventional path. I had relapses where the symptoms came back, and there were days that I felt defeated. But every time I faced a setback, I used it as a chance to learn more about myself and my body. Each challenge reinforced my determination to keep going, to keep pushing for the answers that would lead me to that true healing. I learned to recognize the warning signs of a flare-up and take preventative steps to support my body. I discovered the importance of rest, self-care, and not pushing myself to the brink like I had done all these years. In those dark moments, what kept me going was hope. It was the hope that I could regain control over my health and live a full life. And slowly but surely, my health began to improve. I was on a mission to learn how to crack the code for MS, not just for myself, but for others as well. As I tested, I found that I had the trifecta. I had it all. I had tick-borne diseases, at least 6 of them. I had mycotoxins. I had heavy metals. I had nutrient deficiencies. My mitochondria was not working the way it should. And by putting the pieces together and doing the trials and the errors and finding what worked and what didn't, I was able to craft the perfect MS protocol to regain my health and restore my brain. As many symptoms subside, I realized that my journey was about more than just overcoming a diagnosis. It was about finding strength, resilience, and the courage to create my own path. This experience taught me that healing isn't always a straight line. I've known that for years with my patients, and I've told patients this. However, when it becomes yourself and you have the tools in front of you and you think you have the knowledge, you think you could go from 0 to 60 in 3 seconds flat, but it doesn't work that way, not even with the best practitioner. It's a winding road filled with lessons, growth, and self-discovery. I became my own advocate through this journey, and I found a renewed purpose to help others on their healing journey. For those of you listening, I want you to know that you're not alone. If you're facing a diagnosis that feels overwhelming, or if you are navigating a health journey that seems impossible, remember that there are options. You don't have to settle for a treatment that doesn't align with your values or your vision of healing. You have the power to explore alternative paths, to educate yourself, and to make the choices that are right for you. Thank you for being here today, for sharing this part of my journey. And I hope that by opening up about my experiences, I've inspired you to take control of your own. Listen to the wisdom within your body. Healing is a possibility, and you deserve to feel empowered by this path. If you're interested in learning more about my story, the treatments I explored, and the protocols I've developed, my book is available, and it dives into a deeper version of what I've shared. It's my hope that it serves as a resource and a guide and a source of hope for anyone navigating the complexities of chronic illness. Thank you again for tuning in to Let's Talk Wellness Now. Remember, your journey to wellness is unique, and there's no one-size-fits-all approach. Stay curious, stay hopeful, and most importantly, stay in tune to yourself. Until next time, take care and be well. If this episode has encouraged you and you think it can encourage someone else, please share it.